for joining us on this first brown bag session that we have externally. And I want to thank Dato Seri Nazir, my good friend, that he is able to come and join us. When we started in PEMANDU to do this, and it was really an attempt to find a way how to get people to connect with one another because we're all locked down in our room. Dato Seri Nazir said, my room looks like a jail in prison. And so I think it's important that people get to connect with one another and also try and see if we can learn from one another on the subject of transformation and leadership. So as I was gathering the speakers for the sessions, of course, Dato Seri Nazir was the first one. Next month, we have another one with Tan Sri Tony Fernandez. And in September, we have Azman Mokhtar, Tan Sri Azman Mokhtar. He will share with us his leadership and transformation story at Khazanah. Then October, we have Tan Sri Wahid Omar on his transformational leadership in Maybank, Telecom, Malaysia, and also as Minister in Economic Planning. And then we also have Dato Yvonne Chia in her story and how she led Hong Leong Bank to where it is today. And finally, in December, we also have the privilege to invite someone from Singapore, Mr. Philip Yeo. If we look at his CV, this guy's CV is almost as long as a book. He's been largely responsible for bringing a lot of foreign investment into Singapore at the time he was in charge of EDB. And we have, for the year 2022, we have a very long, good list of people that we want to target. It kicks off, I think, in January with Anthony Tan, the co-founder of Grab. There are many more speakers that will come on a monthly basis. So we look forward to inviting many of you. Today, we have actually a full house in terms of registration. We limited the total registrations to 500. We've got more than that, so we had to turn away some of those who came a little late. And of course, we all are eagerly waiting for Dato Seri Nazir's story about his leadership as well as transformational journey at Cimb. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dato Seri Idris. Ladies and gentlemen, Dato Seri Nazir has done incredible things since the beginning of his work life. He led Cimb as chairman from 2014 to 2018. Previous to this, he led the Cimb Group as CEO from 1994 to 2014, during which he spearheaded Cimb's transformation from a local investment bank into becoming the 5th largest universal bank in ASEAN, the largest Asia-Pacific-based investment bank, and a world leader in Islamic finance. He has also served on the investment panel of the Employees Provident Fund from 2002 to 2017, and has served on the board of Khazanah National from 2014 to 2018. He's also received some of the most prestigious awards from international journals and institutions as a banker and corporate leader. To name a few, he was awarded Best Top Executive in Malaysia by Asia Money in 2009 and in 2010, and was awarded Best CEO in Malaysia by Finance Asia in 2011. And most recently is a Transformational Leader Fellow at the Blavatnik School of Government at Oxford University in 2019. So without further ado, Dato Seri Nazir, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Andrea, and good morning, everyone.
Good morning. So I thought I'd just jump right into it. We have over 500 people in this brown bag session that are so eager to hear from you. I think, so my first question really is just, what was it like leading Cimb? And do you have any leadership secrets that you'd like to share with us today?
Okay, thank you, Andrea. And I thought what I'd do is, basically focus on the leadership lessons that I gathered during my career. But before that, let me just thank Dato Seri Idris and the PEMANDU team for this opportunity. I didn't realize that I was also the guinea pig for your brown bag session, but so I hope, hopefully, I give it a good start. But whatever it is, I think people will not find it difficult to remember this talk because it is coming at the same weekend that football is, of course, coming home, or almost coming home, if not. Now, as I said, the focus will be not so much on the Cimb story, but more on the leadership lessons from that story. If you wanted me to talk about the M&A story, it'll be different list of lessons. If you wanted me to talk about the career progress story, it'll be slightly different. And if you want to talk about the Malaysian political economy, the lessons would be slightly different. But let's start with just a very brief overview of my time at Cimb so that everyone is roughly on the same page. I joined the firm in September 1989. It was my first job. I was employee number 69. And at that time, Cimb was the 7th largest of the 12 merchant banks in Malaysia. So the government only issued 12 licenses for merchant banks, and we were a relatively small one. I spent the next 10 years in various roles in the organization, in corporate finance, in stockbroking, etc., in Cimb. Then in 1999, I became Group CEO at the age of 32. And I remained CEO for the next 15 years until 2014, September 2014, where I transitioned to become its chairman and handed over CEO to Tengku Zafrul, who some of you may know. Then, when I first became CEO, I think it was a time when Cimb had just entered into the Asian financial crisis as probably one of the top 4 merchant banks in KL, in Malaysia. We came out of the financial crisis as the top merchant bank by some distance. And that is a story of taking advantage of opportunity in a crisis. There's the old saying, in a crisis, there's always challenges and opportunities, and we really took advantage of the opportunities. Just simply put, we basically had invested in a fixed income business. We made money in the stockbroking business. Like many people, most people said, okay, this is a very profitable business, so we plow back our profits into more stockbroking, whereas we took the profits and built a bond market business. So of course, in the financial crisis, stock market collapsed, and it was the bond market that grew exponentially, and there really wasn't any material alternative player to Cimb at that time. So we were undisputed number 1 coming out of the Asian financial crisis. I was CEO, and within a couple of years, I decided that we should go public. So Cimb first went public at the beginning of 2003. We were a public company as an investment bank for only 3 years, for 2003 to 2006. And in that period, our share price went up 343%. In 2006, we were privatized again, or delisted as part of an exercise to merge Cimb with its sister commercial bank called Bumiputra Commerce. So the Cimb group today is a merger of the investment bank and the sister commercial bank in the first instance to create what we call the universal bank. We felt that at that time we couldn't remain an independent investment bank because globally more and more commercial banks with bigger balance sheets, greater economies of scale was coming into investment banking. So we also had to become an investment bank. So that was around about 2006. And since then, we quickly decided that, look, if we can do this universal banking model in Malaysia, what about the regional question? And at that time, 2007, our governments came together to launch the so-called ASEAN Economic Community Agenda, that by 2015, we will be one region economically. So therefore, we said, oh, then we should be a bank to basically enable people to do more business, individuals to travel, etc., across the ASEAN region. So we decided to go regional, and we then embarked on a series of M&A. So if you look at Cimb during this period, we were a serial acquirer. We merged with Bumiputra Commerce, as I mentioned. Then we bought Southern Bank in Malaysia. We bought Bank Niaga in Indonesia, merged it with Bank Lipo in Indonesia. We bought GK Go, investment banking platform in Singapore. We bought Bank Thai in Thailand. And then we also bought the equities business of the Royal Bank of Scotland in 2012 during the global financial crisis. So 7 major acquisitions that took us right across ASEAN and beyond. After we bought RBS, we had presence in Australia, South Korea, India, etc. And in some markets where we couldn't buy banks, we also set up new ones. So in Cambodia, in Vietnam, in Philippines, in Laos, we set up new banks. We got new licenses and set up new banks. So it's really, we decided we had a strategy for different markets, depending on what was available and the dynamics of each market. So that was creating the kind of Cimb banking platform as it is today. We also, in 2007, set up the Cmb Foundation, which became a very important part of the business, the giving, the philanthropic side of the business, and we can talk about that later. At its peak, Cimb had about 45,000 staff, so we went from 69 to 45,000 during my time there. And if you look at scale, when we went for IPO, we had a market capitalization of 1.5 billion. When I retired, we had a market capitalization of 60.3 billion. In terms of profits, we went from 2003 at about 120 million to 4.5 billion. And in terms of assets, we went from less than 10 billion to over 500 billion in 2017. And if you had invested in Cimb's IPO in 2003, you would have made a consistent average of 22% return on investment per year for that whole stretch. As I reflect back, not all was successful. Cimb, I wish I did better. We made mistakes. We had to retreat. We had to undo. But I think, we never lost money. We made less money some years, but we never lost money throughout my time as CEO and chairman. It was, and I think as I reflect back on the career, it's the important thing is the bottom line, the net, right? There were pluses, there were minuses, but what is the net over using the long lens of a career? And to paraphrase Frank Sinatra, of course, regrets, I have a few. And in my case, I think certainly not too few to mention. I'm very happy to discuss in the interest of other people learning from my mistakes or Cimb's mistakes, and happy to talk about them later. But as I said, bottom line, I'm very, very satisfied, proud of the career I had. So I thought I'd pick out 10 lessons that maybe I can impart and use some examples from my time at Cimb. The first lesson I would impart for aspiring corporate leaders is this: that first, most important thing, I think you need to understand that man or that woman in the mirror. Yeah, and and it comes from Michael Jackson's song or whatever, but literally there were days when I used to look in the mirror and ask myself 2 questions. One is, what are my own strengths and weaknesses? 2, am I the right person for this job? And I did that over and over again throughout my career. You need to understand your strengths and weaknesses so that you can work on those weaknesses and you can leverage on the strengths. So working on weaknesses, as an example, I'm quite open about it. I was born pretty much with a silver spoon. I had a UK education, and at that time in the 80s in England, we had tea at 4. We didn't work terribly hard. I wanted a tough environment. I felt I needed a tough environment to start my career. So I chose Cimb, which then had a reputation of being a really tough place to work. And I didn't realize how tough it was, because my first 3 years, we were working 14, 16 hours, 6, 7 days a week. It was really, really tough. And at that time, we were lucky to have a job. So my boss, I do remember my first piece of work was to prepare a submission about this stick to the government. Those days, anything you wanted to do, you have to apply to government. So I prepared a book. I handed it to my boss, and he read it, and he called me into the room and he said, "This is the worst piece of work I have ever read," right? Yeah. He picked it up and he smacked it onto my head. Okay, so at that time, you could still do such things. And I I didn't even think anything. I just thought, oh my God, I better do better. I was so competitive. I was so determined. I just wanted to do better. I never thought that, oh, I better report him to HR, you know.
Yeah.
But that was the culture then. We were lucky to get jobs and so on. And of course, another example is, you know, when I became CEO at 32, I looked at it and I said, my God, I'm too young. I was very quick-tempered. I was very impatient, and I was too daring. So those traits I felt had to be kind of toned down. So I had a lot of gray hairs around me. My predecessor, the CEO, I appointed him as my advisor, and I generally look for older people to have around me to kind of offset those kind of dangers of youth, if you like, at that time.
Younger qualities, yeah.
Yeah. And then on this, am I still the right person for the job? I asked myself that many times, you know, when we transition from investment bank to universal bank. Yeah, the bank can transition, but is the CEO still capable of transitioning? I went from being a CEO of about 1,000 people who I knew, and I knew what they did, how they did their work, because I came from within the organization, to leading thousands of people. I think Bank Boom E-commerce then was over 12,000 who I didn't know, and I had to go to give town halls in Bahasa instead of speaking to English in people, individuals that I knew. So it's a very different challenge. And was I up for it? So then I said, okay, I'm still up for it. Then in 2010, when we regionalized the firm, can I run a business? Can I oversee business in Jakarta, in Bangkok, and so on? Was I still up for it? And I said, yeah, I'm still up for it. Then in 2014, when I realized that, okay, what this business needs is to, we've grown too fast. We need to fix the plumbing. We need to restructure. We need to downsize certain areas and so on. Then I looked at it and I said, I can't. I'm not the right person for this job because I think when you do a transformation, and Idris knows it better than anyone else, quite a lot of transformation is actually undoing what was done in the past. And I felt that I probably will not be impartial enough to transform the company properly. So that's when I decided to hand over to Guzafrul. And of course, at that time, Cimb was so big. I felt it was also good to have a chairman with the right set of knowledge and experience in the organization. So I kind of transitioned to chairman of the company. Now, lesson 2 is about mission. I think mission is very, very important, having clarity of mission. And people have mission statements and all that. And one is to have it, 2 is to craft it in a way that works well. My take on this is make it very simple. Mine were very simple and able to communicate all the important things. And then your next level can then have their own missions for their people that cascade from yours. So I remember my first mission was called for Cimb to become the best investment bank in Malaysia post deregulation and liberalization. So it's very clear. We wanted not to be a merchant bank, we wanted to be an investment bank. We wanted to be the best in Malaysia, but we recognized that the rules would be such that the markets would be open, foreign competition would come in. So we were very focused in what we needed to do for that. We needed to build a strong bond business. We needed to integrate merchant banking and stockbroking, and we need to have the talent to do all that, etc. So very focused. Then later on, when we became Universal Bank, I said we must be the most valued universal bank in ASEAN, most valued by the stock market. We wanted to be in ASEAN, so we did this acquisition, and we wanted to be universal. So that was, again, clarity in terms of what the mission was. Now, third lesson is about, I think, earning trust of your people. You're the leader. You want people to move in your direction, and you need to earn their trust. And people work for you because you deliver for them. Whatever it is, you must deliver for them, be it in terms of achieving the mission together, or in terms of their career advancement, in terms of their compensation. And trust is extremely hard to earn and extremely easy to lose. And you need to be very careful. Like, for instance, if you tell people, look, in this year, if we do well, I will pay you, this kind of money. And if you do well, you better pay them because that's what you promised. I remember in 2001, I had this serious problem because I had gone out and said, look, we're going to do, if we do really well, I'll make sure that you all get properly compensated. Then I had the problem because at the time, Bank Negara said that the limit on bonuses for banks is 6 months, right? No matter how well you did, you could quadruple your profits, but you can only pay your staff 6 months. So I didn't know what to do. So the year end was coming, and I was going to be in trouble because I promised my people that, if you do well, we would, share a big bonus, and they did much better than I expected. So I was, kind of committed to paying that bonus. So I basically wrote down all the proposed bonuses. There was, whatever it was, 1,000 of them, individuals. I took the file. I went to Bank Negara. I went to see the advisor of Bank Negara, then Tan Sri No, and I said to him, sir, if you want me to build a leading investment bank in Malaysia, you need to approve this file. And he looked at it and said, okay, fine. I will approve this and I will liberalize it for the whole industry. And that may enable me to kind of meet the promise that I made to my staff. Yeah. So that's an example of how you have to, do what it takes to maintain the promise. And if you, of course, if for a good reason you can't, then you better as hell explain it well. Otherwise, trust will be lost and you will not be able to be a good leader. Another lesson 4 is empathy. I think you need to know your staff. You need to know, especially your direct reports. You must, I think the best way is to project yourself, put yourself in their shoes when you communicate with them, and know what makes them tick, what they need to hear, and so on. And remember this, that people change. I remember one year I paid this guy, this person, 6 months bonus. He'd been used to getting 1 month, and he was basically in tears. He was so happy that he got the 6 months bonus. I remember paying it. Then 12 months later, I paid him 5 months bonus, and he cried out of disappointment. Yeah. So what I'm sharing with you is how expectations change and people change. So when you communicate, you need to understand expectations and manage those expectations. Don't just, oh, everybody who gets 6 months, I treat them like this. Everybody who gets 2 months, I treat them like this. You can't. People basically react according to expectations, and you need to understand that. And of course, when you lead people, it's not just about compensation, it's also about integrity. And here again, systems are very important. I remember we had a branch manager in Jakarta. He was our best branch manager for years and years and years. And then one day we realized he was stealing money, right? And then when we investigated, we just couldn't believe it, but we investigated, it was true, he's stealing money, but we also found out that his wife had cancer. Oh. So that gets you the moral question, right? I don't know, it would be very cruel to think that he did the wrong thing even, when your wife is dying. Yeah. A choice, I needed the money. So this is why systems are very important. I'll get back to that later, but systems are very important and people change. Do not think that the person, people are the same. Just because he's trustworthy today, he might not be trustworthy tomorrow. So you need systems to monitor people. You need to continue to engage to understand people. Yeah, and generally, when you communicate, you must understand with the audience. You must have empathy with the audience, right? And of course, some people will remind me that one of the issues today in politics in Malaysia is leadership seems to be very tone deaf. But that's a different question. The 5th lesson is about diversity, optimizing diversity. It's very important. I mean, Malaysia's great strength is its diversity, and diversity can go 2 ways. You can make it your strength. You can make it your bane. You can make it very divisive. And here I don't talk about just ethnicity. I talk about gender. I talk about age. I talk about backgrounds. It's very important. So when you create teams, you have to pick people with diverse backgrounds. Humans are tribal. We naturally like to hang out with people who are the same like us, go out to makan in the same restaurants as us, etc. So we're tribal. Yeah, so we must fight against that tribalism, that natural tendency. And you find that these diverse teams, you have different perspectives when you face problems. Even when you're doing sales, you have different types of people to engage different types of customers. Yeah, and I've gone on record elsewhere to say that one my proposed innovation on diversity is actually we have this push to have gender diversity, I think we should also have age diversity. Why can't we insist that every board should have one representative from the youth?
Yeah.
Right? We roll it, right? Every 2 years we change, but we must always have someone who's under 30, because I think that's the way to beat this, generation gap that we're facing, because you and I had very different upbringings, right? Technology, etc. So for my generation to understand your generation, we need you to be in the circle of decision making. Yeah, so that's a suggestion that I've made quite openly. And I learned this issue of diversity very early when I joined Cimb. I was diversity. I was the only Malay or non-Chinese in my whole entire team. Yeah, Cimb basically at that time didn't really hire Malays, to be honest.
Yeah.
And when I came in, I was Malay, I was privileged, and thirdly, I was also not trained in finance or accounting. I did economics. So Cimb had never hired any of those three traits before, or qualifications before. Yeah. So when I came on board, it was really tough, and I had to question my choice many times. But I stuck with it, and gradually I found that, look, I was actually really enhancing this team. I didn't work. If I worked 14 hours, they were working 18 hours, right? I didn't have that kind of stamina, and I like to do other things with my life as well.
Yeah.
And then they were already good at numbers, and I wasn't good enough at numbers then. So then I had to find my kind of diversity input into the team, and I found that I articulated better, I was better at selling, and I had more creative ideas than the others, and and so on. So we made a great team by each of us finding what our niche was, and we were stronger as a whole. Yeah. And I'd just like to throw in one more point about diversity. I think when you build teams, you need to have a combination of what I call missionaries and mercenaries.
Yeah.
This is very important. I was very lucky because I had a preponderance of missionaries, people who grew up with me at Cimb, who believed in my mission. Right? And these people generally stay there for a long time, and have been through thick and thin, really understand your kind of mission. Yeah. However, they might not have the kind of new strength or specific skills that are needed. So at some point, you need mercenaries. Yeah. So for instance, when Cimb, an investment bank, went into retail banking, I needed a professional retail banker. So they come on board with their knowledge, but managing them and having them as a team is quite different because, of course, they tend to be more about what's in it for them. They may not be even thinking of staying the course with you, and so on. And you need this mix. Yeah, but to me, one of the key to my Cimb achievements was to have a large number of missionaries with me. Yeah, and less mercenaries. A sixth lesson is, I think it's very important to be self-assured and a team player as a leader. I think you need to be confident in your own abilities, and you need to hire people who are smarter than you. Yeah, I remember, I hope she doesn't mind me sharing, I think Dato Hamida, who many people will know, she's become a bit of a queen of HR today. But when I first appointed her as head of HR, I used to tell her, I said, your biggest problem is you're too scared to hire people who are smarter than you. And that will always constrain your evolution, your ability, or the strength of your team. You need to be bold and say, it's okay. You hire people who are smarter than you. If they deserve your job, then maybe I'll find you something else. Right? Don't be scared of hiring people that are better than you. And don't be scared of managing people who are smarter than you. Yeah, I think this is a very important trait of leadership. And of course, if you look at that at the macro level in Malaysia, I've said this very openly. One of the issues we've had has been talent development in our political leadership. When I grew up in the 70s and 80s, you look at the talent pool, and you could look at the deputy minister talent pool. You had the Rais Yatim, Rafida Aziz, Musa Hitam, etc. Right? Yeah. And suddenly, in the 90s and 2000s, we look at the bench of deputy ministers we had. Many of them were, pensionable age, right? So where was the grooming of future leaders? And I think that is one of the failures of political leadership in this country. So this, and that derives from my point about people being uncomfortable with people who are smarter than them, able to talk and all that. People like to appoint yes men. If you are only like yes men, then I think your leadership potential is limited.
Yeah.
And seventh lesson is, I think one needs to be able to be consultative, but also bold. I think you must get the best people around and debate, and at the right time, look, we've got this right solution, and we go forwards as a team, right? You must have lots of people around you who will speak truth to power, and then I think you can best solve your problems. I remember, I don't know if you know, Cimb today is actually the result of a very audacious deal done by Cmb in 2006. PNB had multiple plantation companies, and they wanted to merge these companies, but they didn't quite know how to do it because one issue was PNB. When you own all companies, you cannot vote because you're conflicted, right?
Yeah.
So if PNB cannot vote, then the risk is that the minorities will reject. So then, this deal was to be done, but no one knew how to do it. So I basically did, and PNB did not hire Cimb. They hired every other investment bank to look at it, but didn't hire Cimb. So I said, our market share is going to be really undermined if we don't win this deal. So I got some of my best brains in a room. So I remember I said, we do not leave this room until we solve this problem. So we debated and debated, we argued and argued for hours and hours. And then finally we came up with the idea that, the way to do this is for Cimb to buy all these companies. It was audacious because at the time Cimb, our market cap was 15 billion and we wanted to buy 7 listed companies in palm oil, basically, and worth 30 over billion. So it was a very audacious deal. But that was how we engineered the merger of what is today called Cimb. And that was really done by virtue of, putting the best brains together and able to kind of bring everybody's best thinking to the table to come up with the right solution.
Yeah.
Number 8 is, it's important to be able to take small steps as well as big leaps. And this, as a leader, is a choice you have to make. You must be daring to make big leaps. We took big leaps. We converted to Universal Bank and did a hostile takeover of Southern Bank and so on and so forth. But sometimes you need small steps as well. And here's where I think, on hindsight, Cimb did not pause and take small steps soon enough. We took too many big steps in the end. We did too many acquisitions. And I was in a rush because, as I mentioned to you, the ASEAN Economic Community was 2015. So I wanted to create this monster universal bank across ASEAN within that time frame. So that meant we were rushing. And we made some acquisitions which we didn't digest properly. But on hindsight, I would have still done the same thing, but on a much slower pace. But instead, we were acquiring too many things and couldn't integrate some of the things that we acquired. The 9th lesson is this, that you must spare thinking time. It's very important. I hate name dropping here, but I learned this from Tony Blair. He used to tell me that, when he was PM, and he was successful PM, he used to spend half a day a week, blank out his diary and think. Right. And I found thinking time was very important. Before I became CEO, I took a few months off and planned the next 5 years of Cimb. And I wrote it down and I followed it. And, thinking time is very important. And I felt that towards the end of my career, when I was, having to oversee thousands of people, I felt that I ran out of thinking time. I just was so busy. And, you're kind of buzzing around and you kind of forget to do the adequate thinking. So please, as a leader, you must spare thinking time. And I think that the 10th lesson I want to share with everyone is this, that you must understand your context, right? You must understand the hard truth of the market or the place that you operate in this case, the Malaysian context. You must go beyond the facade, beyond the BS, and understand it for what it is.
Yeah.
I studied economics and politics, and they used to say, oh, economics and politics are inextricably linked. And, I thought it true. But when I came back to Malaysia, actually, it is inextricably linked, but politics wins every time.
Yeah.
And you need to understand that when you do business in Malaysia. I remember when we did this is Idris originated deal, which is the partnership between AirAsia and Malaysia Airlines. In the end of the day, that was a good business deal, but it was a lousy political deal. And that deal failed. It had to be unwound. I still believe that Idris's thesis that this was the right way for the country to have one airline that's able to do full service as well. Low cost is the way to go. So instead today, must continue to bleed and so on and so forth. So unfortunately, that deal was never properly consummated. Then I remember things like the growth of the Renault Group in the 90s. I remember the most illogical things taking place, and you need to understand the context of that illogic being, because it was a politically driven conglomerate. And I remember dealing the Bakun project. It was the most illogical thing that Bakun. You're from Sarawak, aren't you?
Yes.
So,
beautiful place.
At the time was this huge environmental disaster. But okay, we needed the energy. But why was the Bakun project handed over to Ting Peking? I could never figure that out.
Yeah.
There was no tender, nothing. Ting Peking got it. The answer was politics. And of course, when Ting Peking got it, he didn't do it properly. And worst of all, Cimb had to underwrite the rights issue. We basically lent him a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I remember we said, okay, never mind. If the project is cancelled, Ting Peking will hand back the money, because the money is for the project. So of course, the project was cancelled. Asian financial crisis came. But when we went to get the money had gone. Right? And then we realized that I learned the hard lesson that in Malaysia, the regulation, the legislation was very clear. The money was ours. He should give it to us.
Yeah.
But nobody took any action on Ting Peking. Yeah. So one must be very aware of the political context. And of course, then there's the whole 1MDB debacle and all that. So that's an example of how politics is such. I said it before. Malaysia does not have an economy. We only have a political economy.
Yeah.
The other thing is, you must also be careful with what governments say. That's a hard lesson I learned. The ASEAN Economic Community by 2015, where we basically structured our whole business in order to be ready for that eventuality. When AEC actually came, it really was far from the promised land. They said, free movement of capital and trade and so on and so forth. It looked very different in the end. When the tariffs came down, non-tariff barriers went up and so on. So AEC was just not what was promised. And the rules and regulations for banking to cater for the AEC also was never liberalized according to the plan. But of course, everybody operates in an imperfect context. You just need to understand it, and you need to take risks. If you don't want to take risks, stay home.
Yeah.
If you don't want to make mistakes, then you better live in a monastery, right?
Yeah.
Life is about taking risks, making mistakes, and when you make mistakes, it's important to live with your decisions. You must be able to live with your mistakes. I remember the mistakes I made. I think when not mistakes, failures, if you like. When Cimb was listed in 2003, for the first 4 months, the share price was flat as a pancake. Right, at IPO price. I was very cocky those days. I thought everything I list goes up. Basically. But then when I list my own company, it was flat as a pancake for 4 months. And we sat in the room and basically asked ourselves, why did we screw up? And then we basically realized that we did not manage the investor communication and our capital properly. So we had to repair the situation. I think we did something dramatic. We issued a dividend after 4 months of listing. I mean, it's a bit of a crazy thing to do. No accounting textbook will tell you to do this, but we issued a huge dividend. So you paid 170 for the Cimb IPO. 4 months later, you got 40 cents dividend. But the trick was when we did that, all international fund managers wanted to know who the hell these mad people were. So we then went around the world and explained our logic, apologized for getting it wrong the first time, and we were forgiven. So from then, that's when the Cimb share price doubled and trebled over the next few years, starting from failure. So from we had success from the corner of failure, basically. Yeah. So that's important. And when we bought RBS, I think that was a bridge too far. We expanded too much and we had to retreat. But when we retreated, we shrank. And then, in 2017, we managed to sell this ex-RBS Cimb platform to the Chinese for a very decent price. So that's, again, being very focused. You made a mistake, so let's undo it as best as possible. Yeah. And then finally, in terms of the Malaysian context, I think, I just want people to remember hypocrisy abounds in the Malaysian political economy.
Yeah.
Please, I remember those days in 2015 or 2014, whatever, I was very upset about what was going on in 1MDB. And I used to speak openly about it. I used to say, we need to properly investigate what's going on in 1MDB and all that. And I remember many people who called me and said, look, I said, you shouldn't, you shouldn't bring this up. You should keep very quiet, don't challenge the government, blah, blah, blah. And it's ironic that, of course, when Pakatan came in and 1MDB became the huge debacle that it proved to be, many of these people who actually told me not to speak against 1MDB suddenly all got promoted. So I found it very, very interesting to see the hypocrisy of this. And my advice is this: don't be a hypocrite, but expect others might well be, so that you won't get so disappointed. So, Andrea, those are the 10 lessons I wanted to share, just very quickly. Man in the mirror, mission clarity, trust, empathy, diversity, be self-assured, be consultative yet bold, take small steps and big leaps, spare thinking time, and understand the hard truths about the Malaysian political economy. And, I hope that the audience here find at least one or two of those lessons useful as, you guys build your careers in this market. And, I'm very thankful for the career I had. I mean, certainly Cimb, whether it's from the beginning of my career or when I became CEO, achieved much, much more than I ever dreamt for it. So on that, I'm extremely proud. Of course, my career at Cimb unfortunately came to a premature and slightly messy end. When the new government came in and the CEP came in, they decided that, there had to be a cleansing of GLC leaders, and Cimb was deemed a GLC. And interestingly, I was quite gutted at the time. I was so vested in Cimb. And I was quite gutted. But on hindsight, the fact that they asked me to step aside actually was helpful, because it meant I never had to give up Cimb. I never had to give up my people. I never had to give up on the mission. I had no choice. So in a way, it made it easier for me. So actually transitioning out of Cimb was actually easier than I thought. And of course, after that, I went to Oxford for a year. And I spent a lot of time in Oxford thinking about what is wrong with the Malaysian political economy, what were the lessons from my careers, and how we could change Malaysia for the better. But of course, that is not for this discussion. You hired me to talk only about my corporate career. So with that, I'll wrap up and hand back to you, Andre. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dato Seri. We have one last question. This question we will direct to both of you, Dato Seri Nazir and Dato Seri Razak. we know that both of you are avid fans of Chelsea Football Club, and they were very successful this year. So I guess the question is first to Dato Seri Idris and then to Dato Seri Nazir, why the affinity towards Chelsea? Is it a requirement to be a CEO? First, Dato Seri Idris, if you can unmute your mic.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Well, I became a fan of Chelsea Football Club because of Ruud Gullit. Some of you may recall, he was a very, very big player for AC Milan. And then, because he's Dutch, and I was working in Holland at the time for Shell. And so it was because of him and a few of the other players, Holland became the champion of Europe. And at that time, when he was AC Milan, he was he brought the team to become, the Champions League, the numero uno, a couple of years. Then he switched in 1996 to become a Chelsea player, to become also 1 year later, then he became a player manager. And so it was the start of all of it. He was really, at that time, he was this huge dreadlock, and he was a real big star. I was absolutely big fan of Ruud Gullit at the time. So I remember when my wife and we got transferred to London for Shell, and the teams wasn't playing very well. We were a couple of games at Stamford Bridge. My wife said, "Why don't we change club?" I looked at her, I said, "We don't simply change club just because you're losing. But we are very happy now. We're champions of Europe." Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dato Seri Idris. Dato Seri Nazir, same question to you, but you have to give a different answer than Dato Seri Idris.
Not too different. I mean, I kind of fancied myself as a footballer those days.
Oh.
And I felt that the footballer who was almost as skillful as me was someone called Glenn Hoddle. And he moved to Chelsea. I think he hired Ruud Gullit. And he took me to Chelsea and as a supporter, and I never left. And as you know, today, really, if you want to have a successful career, you really should be a Chelsea fan.
Thank you, Dato Seri Idris. So this concludes our brown bag today. Once again, thank you, Dato Seri Nazir, for joining us and for taking the time to share your incredible story and the lessons that you've learned during your time as CEO at Cimb. Thank you as well to everyone in the audience for joining us. Apologies, can't answer all of your questions, but be sure to join us for our upcoming series that we'll be having on a monthly basis. We have an incredible list of panelists lined up for the upcoming brown bag sessions. If you'd like to know more, scan the QR code for all of our social medias. And as always, stay safe, stay well, and have a good weekend. Bye.